In 1973, a Saudi prince sat across from an American diplomat in a palace outside Riyadh. They weren't discussing weapons or treaties. They were designing a machine so elegant, so perfectly hidden, that 50 years later, most people have no idea it's running. The deal they made that day didn't just change how oil gets sold, it changed what money is. Here's the trick. America doesn't produce the most oil. It doesn't own the biggest reserves. But for half a century, if you wanted to buy oil anywhere on Earth, you needed American dollars to do it. Not euros, not yen, not gold, dollars. That's not an accident, that's architecture. And right now, that architecture is cracking. Let's rewind. After World War II, the US dollar became the world's reserve currency. Countries agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. $35 bought you 1 ounce. It was stable. It was backed by something real, until it wasn't. By 1971, America had printed too many dollars. The gold reserves couldn't cover it. Other countries started asking questions. France literally sent warships to collect its gold from New York. So President Nixon did something radical. He severed the link. No more gold standard. The dollar would now float freely, backed by nothing but trust. That should have been a disaster. Currencies need anchors. Without gold, what was stopping the dollar from collapsing? Here's what: oil. 2 years later, that meeting in Riyadh happened. The US made Saudi Arabia an offer. We'll protect you militarily. We'll sell you weapons. We'll guarantee your security. In return, you do one thing: sell your oil in dollars, only dollars, and convince OPEC to do the same. The Saudis agreed. Suddenly, every country on Earth needed dollars, not because they loved America, because they needed energy. Japan, Germany, China, India, it didn't matter who you were. If your economy ran on oil, you needed a reserve of US currency. You had to buy dollars before you could buy oil. This created a loop. Countries sell goods to America, earn dollars, then use those dollars to buy oil. The dollars flow out, then flow back in. The US can print more dollars to pay for imports, and the world absorbs them because they need dollars for energy. It's a perpetual motion machine. As long as oil trades in dollars, demand for dollars never stops. This system has a name: the Petrodollar. And it gave America a superpower that no empire in history ever had: the ability to print the currency the world runs on. Think about what that means in practice. When the US government spends more than it earns, it borrows. It issues treasury bonds. Other countries buy those bonds because they're holding dollars anyway, and treasuries are considered safe. So America's debt gets funded by the same countries it's buying products from. China manufactures goods, sells them to America, gets paid in dollars, then lends those dollars back to America by buying US debt. It's circular. It's bizarre, and it only works because oil is priced in dollars. This gives the US something economists call exorbitant privilege. It can run massive deficits without the consequences other countries face. It can sanction nations by cutting them off from the dollar system. If you can't access dollars, you can't buy oil. And if you can't buy oil, your economy dies. That's leverage. That's power. Russia learned this in 2014 when it was locked out of dollar transactions after Crimea. Iran's been learning it for decades. Venezuela, Syria, the list grows. The weapon isn't missiles, it's access to the currency. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This system was never negotiated in public. There's no treaty, no international agreement. It's a handshake deal enforced by geopolitics and aircraft carriers. And handshake deals don't last forever. Let's talk numbers. Global oil consumption is around 100 million barrels per day. At $100 per barrel, that's $10 billion changing hands every single day. Multiply that across a year and you're looking at multiple trillion-dollar flows, all denominated in dollars. The US dollar makes up about 60% of global foreign exchange reserves. That's down from 85% in the 1970s, but it's still dominant. Central banks around the world hold dollars not because they want to, but because they have to. It's the toll for participating in the global economy. but the cracks are showing. In 2023, Saudi Arabia started discussing oil sales in yuan with China. The same Saudi Arabia that built the petrodollar system. That's not a small headline. That's a signal. China is now the world's largest oil importer. It buys more than the US does, and it doesn't want to keep holding trillions in US debt. So it's offering an alternative. Sell us oil in yuan. We'll buy your energy. You don't need to deal in dollars. Russia's doing the same thing. After being cut off from SWIFT and dollar markets, it started selling oil to India in rupees and to China in yuan. Not because it wanted to, because it had to. But once the mechanism exists, it's replicable. The petrodollar isn't backed by gold, it's backed by necessity. And necessity is negotiable. Here's where it gets strange. The US economy doesn't actually need oil imports the way it used to. America is now one of the largest oil producers in the world thanks to shale. In some years, it's a net exporter. The irony is almost funny. The country that built a financial system around controlling oil no longer depends on foreign oil, but it still depends on the world needing dollars to buy oil. That's the hidden engine. It's not about the oil itself. It's about the currency the oil is sold in. The moment oil trades in multiple currencies, the demand for dollars fractures. And if demand fractures, all those dollars the US has printed over decades come flooding back. That's inflation. That's loss of purchasing power. That's the end of exorbitant privilege. Other countries know this. That's why you're seeing moves toward alternatives. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are exploring a common currency for trade. It's early, it's clunky, but the intent is clear. Build a system that doesn't require dollars. The European Union tried this with the euro. Saddam Hussein tried it in 2000 when he switched Iraq's oil sales to euros. Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency. Both men are dead. That's not conspiracy. That's precedent. The petrodollar has been defended, sometimes violently, but you can't invade China. You can't regime change a fifth of the world's population. The math is different now. Let's get specific about what happens if the petrodollar unravels. First, the dollar weakens, not overnight, but steadily. As global demand for dollars drops, the currency loses value relative to other currencies. That makes imports more expensive for Americans. Everything from electronics to clothes to food that comes from abroad costs more. Second, interest rates rise. If foreign countries stop buying US treasuries, the government has to offer higher yields to attract buyers. Higher yields mean higher borrowing costs. That affects mortgages, business loans, credit cards. The cost of money goes up. Third, inflation accelerates. All those dollars that were sitting in foreign reserves start circulating. More dollars chasing the same goods. Prices climb. Fourth, American geopolitical influence shrinks. If you can't threaten to cut countries off from dollars, you lose a tool. Sanctions become less effective. Alliances become more transactional. None of this happens in a week. It's a slow bleed. But the direction matters more than the speed. Here's the paradox. The stronger the US tries to weaponize the dollar, the faster countries look for exits. Every sanction, every freeze of foreign assets, every use of financial power makes the rest of the world nervous. If it can happen to Russia, it can happen to anyone. So they build alternatives. Saudi Arabia's flirtation with yuan isn't ideological, it's insurance. China's Belt and Road Initiative isn't just about infrastructure, it's about creating trade routes that bypass dollar dominance. Even Europe has discussed building payment systems independent of the US. The system that gave America unmatched power is also the system that makes everyone else uncomfortable. And discomfort breeds innovation. The US isn't powerless here. The dollar is still the most liquid, most trusted currency. American capital markets are the deepest in the world. The legal system is stable. Those advantages don't vanish. But they're not insurmountable either. Trust erodes. Alternatives emerge. What's strange is how little this is discussed. You'll hear about inflation, interest rates, stock markets. But the petrodollar, the mechanism underpinning all of it, stays in the background. It's too big, too abstract, until it's not. There's a question no one wants to ask out loud. What happens to American living standards if the dollar loses its reserve status? The cheap goods, the affordable debt, the ability to fund massive government programs without immediate consequences, all of that rests on other countries needing dollars. If that need diminishes, Americans don't just lose financial leverage, they lose purchasing power. The lifestyle the U.S. has exported globally, the cars, the homes, the consumption, was funded in part by this system, not by productivity alone, by the structural advantage of printing the world's reserve currency. It's not a moral judgment, it's math, and the math is changing. So where does this end? Probably not with a dramatic collapse, more likely a slow diversification. The dollar remains important but not dominant. Oil trades in a basket of currencies. Countries hold reserves in yuan, euros, maybe digital currencies. The world becomes multipolar financially, not just politically. America adjusts. It can't run the deficits it used to. It can't borrow as cheaply. But it's still a large, innovative economy. It adapts, just with less margin for error. The deeper question is whether anyone's ready for that. American policy still assumes dollar dominance. The budget assumes it. The military assumes it. The entire geopolitical strategy assumes it. But assumptions aren't guarantees. That meeting in Riyadh in 1973 created a machine that ran for 50 years. Machines don't run forever. They wear down, they get replaced. The world is already building the replacement. We just haven't noticed yet. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. The thing that defines global power is changing. And most people have no idea it's happening. They see the symptoms: inflation, interest rates, shifting alliances, but not the cause. The invisible loop is unraveling, slowly, quietly, but it's unraveling. The question isn't whether the petrodollar ends. The question is what comes after, and no one knows the answer to that yet.